and welcome. In today's episode, I'm going to share unnerving encounters with black-eyed children. These stories include 2 possible dream encounters with these beings, bringing up the possibility of them being able to manipulate our dreams, and 2 girls who were stalked by a mysterious boy who was not a black-eyed child, but something similar and possibly more dangerous. But first, we start with a poster who shared a bizarre story where the entities involved displayed erratic behavior at a campsite one night. Also, if you'd like to help support the channel, click on the join button below. Alright, let's get into today's stories. The first story of this episode comes to us from a poster who did not even make the connection between his encounter and black-eyed children until he posted his story online, and another user suggested that what he had the misfortune of dealing with one night were black-eyed children. His encounter took place in the Florida Everglades when he was camping out while attending a music festival. A few days prior to him going to the music festival, the original poster, or OP, lost his voice, so he had a whistle hanging around his neck to help with communication. One of his friends had taken a Xanax and was sleeping in the tent, while he and his other friends were busy cleaning up the area outside. Their tent was on the larger side with 2 entrances, but not that tall, allowing them to easily see over it. Out of nowhere, the OP spotted 2 girls making their way toward them. He estimates that they were about 16 years old. They were giggling and playfully running around the tent area. He was a bit perplexed by the scene and turned to his friend, who was standing beside him, hoping she had some answers or maybe even knew the girls, but she did not. It was then that he noticed the girls were moving incredibly fast. In the blink of an eye, one of the girls appeared to be at the opposite end of the tent, urgently scratching at the door and wanting to be let in. They were wearing traditional Native American clothing from head to toe with beaded and braided hair. And their eyes were all black, completely devoid of any white. Panic came over the OP then as the girls seemed to glitch and static, as he describes it, rapidly moving from 50 feet away to just 3 feet in less than a second, only to return to scratching at the door and asking to be let in. He says their speaking sounded like a broken record. He then began wildly blowing his whistle, and just like that, the 2 girls vanished into thin air. The entire encounter lasted only a few minutes, he says, but in that moment, it felt as if time itself had come to a stop. I've heard of black-eyed children stories where they try to get into someone's house or car, but this is the first time I've heard of them trying to get into someone's tent. The erratic behavior of the girls is different than how they usually act, but unnerving nonetheless, if not more so than their usual stoic behavior due to the fact that the OP describes them as glitching around the campsite. This to me just points to these things being paranormal. I've said before that I believe they just take the form of children to try and get people to lower their guard and allow them to enter their homes, cars, or even tents. I believe most people know this by now, especially if you've heard enough of these stories, but absolutely do not permit them to enter your house, cars, or whatever, and by extension your life. These beings are malicious in nature and nothing good has ever come from them being allowed entry. I'm not sure what I would have done if I was in the position of the people in this story, to have these weird girls glitching all over the campsite before scratching on their tent wanting to be let in. Another thing I want to point out here is he describes them sounding like a broken record. This is common in cryptid stories as well as other paranormal stories, with voices or sounds having a quality to them that make them sound like a recording or repeating the same exact way. They are usually described as sounding mechanical, and him saying they sounded like a broken record reminded me of that. Just a minor detail in this story that comes up a lot during encounters. It would be a bizarre thing to hear for sure. What do you think about this one? And what would you do if you found yourself in the same situation? The next story comes from a poster who had not just one bizarre dream about black-eyed children, but 3 vivid dreams in one night. I've often talked about on this channel how cryptids seem to be able to invade and affect our dreams, but I know for a fact that paranormal entities, such as black-eyed children, can. I have experienced this myself as I was tormented by the same dream over and over, playing out the exact same way every single time before waking up in each instance to an evil presence in my bedroom. It wasn't quite the same as sleep paralysis, as I could still move, and I never saw anything, but I knew it was there. Obviously, this has nothing to do with this story, but I just wanted to give you an example that this phenomenon does happen, and being that black-eyed children seem to be of paranormal origins, as many believe, who's to say they can't affect our dreams as well? The original poster story took place when her mother-in-law was temporarily staying with her and her family at the time, after returning from the hospital. 3 days into her mother-in-law's stay is when her dreams came. As previously mentioned, she had not just one dream, but 3 dreams or nightmares, she says, involving black-eyed children. The first dream began normally, according to her, as she has a vivid dream life. She found herself in a house with a walkout finished basement. As she explored the house, she found everything except the shower. She thought it could be located outside. Keep in mind here that this was a dream. Opening the screen door, she stuck her head out to see if there was an outdoor shower. Instead, she saw a pond in the backyard as well as a young boy who looked to her as if he was about 6 years old. She immediately recognized him as a black-eyed child and tried to shut and lock the door as he started walking towards her. As he walked toward her, he transformed into an older child before telling her he was pleased that she had recognized him for what he truly was. It was then she began to call out for her angels and spirit protectors, but was unable to for some reason. The dream then ended with her waking up terrified. Finally, she was able to drift back to sleep and found herself in her mother-in-law's recently sold old house. In the backyard, she found a black-eyed child. The OP and her husband left the house in his truck and she once again woke up. After falling asleep for the 3rd time, she found herself walking through her neighborhood alongside a boy she knew. The boy kept mentioning that the child had come back. They continued talking about the child when suddenly the boy exclaimed that the black-eyed child was back. This time she was able to summon her angels within the dream and warned everyone not to let the child enter the house. She ends her post by asking if it's possible that her mother-in-law unknowingly brought something home from the hospital. In my going down the cryptid rabbit hole, I quickly noticed how many posts talk about seeing these beings in their dreams either before or after encounters, with the dreams seeming so vivid and real. Now I'm starting to see the same thing when researching the black-eyed children phenomenon, and I don't think it's a coincidence. As I mentioned before, I experienced this myself and know it can happen, so I don't blame the OP at all for trying to find some answers and thinking maybe something attached itself to her mother-in-law and followed her home from the hospital. That is entirely possible. Hopefully this was just a one-off occurrence and didn't repeat. Now I will say that it very well could have been just a strange series of dreams and that's it. But the fact that she had 3 different dreams in one night involving the same black-eyed child is the reason I think otherwise. However, she posted about the dreams 2 years ago and there are no other posts, so it doesn't look like anything came from it, which is good. This also points to it being just a dream. I still think it's weird that there were 3 dreams in one night all with the same entity though. What do you make of this one? The next story also comes from a poster who had a dream involving black-eyed children. As I searched for stories to tell, I am seeing this phenomenon more and more, not just with black-eyed children but with cryptids as well. As I mentioned in the previous story, being that black-eyed children seem to be paranormal, I don't doubt that this could happen. The original poster shared her dream online hoping to get interpretations of what it could mean. She points out that before this happened, she hadn't watched anything remotely scary before going to bed, and that her dreams are usually quite ordinary. She isn't easily frightened, but this one was particularly eerie. In her dream, she found herself on her old childhood school bus. It was stopped at a familiar bus stop, but something just felt off. The surroundings looked the same except that there were more trees than she remembered. Nearby, there was a group of children floating in midair. Strangely, most of them had no faces, with their hair obscuring their features. Both her window and the one in front of her were open, and she felt frozen in place, unable to close the windows. But at the same time, she had no desire to do so. She didn't want to be anywhere near those levitating children, so she stayed as far away from them as possible, sitting as close to the aisle as she was able to. It was then that one of the girls flew up to her window. The girl's eyes were completely black, devoid of any trace of white. The girl proceeded to smile, only then to spit in her face. The disgusting act prompted the OP to immediately wipe it off with her hand. But to her horror, her hand began to burn and she started hearing a sizzling sound. The affected area of her skin turned a dark shade of purple before scabbing over. Consumed by anger, the OP couldn't help but call her a certain derogatory word, but the girl merely responded with a smirk and told her what she could go do. The bus then began moving forward. She adds here how weird the dream and encounter were, leaving her pondering its significance, wondering if it was in any way paranormal. She ends her post by saying maybe her dream meant nothing, but she wanted to post it to see what others had to say about it. We once again have another person searching for answers after having a vivid dream that was so impactful it left a lasting impression. I'm sure we have all had dreams like this, where we are left wondering what it could mean. Just like in the previous story, I don't blame her for trying to seek out answers for something that had that kind of effect on her. Again, I will say that it could have been just a dream, but we once again have a very vivid dream involving an entity that people all over the world have encountered. But I still felt like it was worth including in this episode due to these dream encounters coming up more often, with people turning to the online community looking for answers about them. What do you think about these dream encounters? Is there anything to it? The final story of this episode comes from a poster who had an encounter with an entity that wasn't a black-eyed child, but something very similar, if not even more dangerous. I'll admit that this is the first I've heard of this phenomenon, as I came across the story while looking for other black-eyed children stories. But this one, where the original poster was followed home by something, was too good to pass up. Her encounter took place back in her teenage years while she was at the mall with her friend. This happened long before the novelty contact lenses that changed eye colors became a trend. It was late at night when she bumped into this mysterious young man at the mall. She and her friend were heading to the movie theater that was attached to the mall. As luck would have it, the concession stand had a problem with the soft drink machine, so they directed them to the food court to get their drinks. This boy, who was around her age, had a striking resemblance to Kiefer Sutherland from The Lost Boys, according to the OP. He approached them and struck up a conversation with her and her friend, but he didn't go into the movie theater. He was wearing sunglasses with rather dark lenses, which initially obscured his eyes. However, upon closer inspection, she realized his eyes had a distinct, glassy, metallic silver appearance. The OP mentioned his eyes to her friend, who confessed that she found him creepy as well. She had also noticed his unusual eyes, but they both brushed it off as a random encounter. But they were wrong. After the movie, her friend's brother picked them up and she decided to spend the night at her friend's house. The OP points out here that neither girl never once disclosed their name or their destination after the movie to the boy. They didn't refer to each other by name in front of him or mention where they lived. They weren't rude to the mysterious boy by any means, but left the conversation at idle chit-chat. Imagine their surprise when waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning to find a mysterious figure lurking outside the window. It was the mysterious silver-eyed boy they met at the mall, and he was persistently attempting to get the OP to invite him inside. She goes on to say that she has seen way too many vampire movies to allow him to come inside, especially someone giving off creepy vampire vibes who had no reason to know where to find them. The OP told him to leave immediately, using much harsher words than that, and performed a banishing pentagram. She then grabbed some salt and sealed every possible entrance to her friend's home. Over the course of the next week or so, they would see the boy multiple times. It became quite clear that he was stalking them. The OP notes here that there was something off about him, something sinister behind the smile he gave them each time he saw the two girls. According to her, the smile looked out of place for a normal boy. It got to the point that they sought the help of their friend's grandmother, who was well versed in hoodoo. Hoodoo is a set of spiritual practices, traditions, and beliefs that were created by enslaved African Americans in the southern United States from various traditional African spiritualities, Christianity, and elements of indigenous botanical knowledge. Practitioners of hoodoo are called root workers, conjure doctors, conjure man or woman, or root doctors. Along with her grandmother, they performed a powerful ritual hoping to banish him for good. And it worked. The boy finally disappeared. The OP says that there was no denying that he was up to no good and his eyes were not human. She had a strong suspicion that there was something darker using his youthful appearance to prey on unsuspecting victims. She believes that's what black-eyed children are as well. When she told him to leave her friend's home and salted the windows, she could clearly see that he was not pleased at all. His annoyance was evident when he saw the protective charms they had created with her friend's grandmother, an item she calls grizz bags. She ends her post by saying he picked the wrong girls to mess with and was not happy at all about it, believing he became annoyed because of the time wasted in his pursuit of them. I know this story doesn't involve black-eyed children, but the similarities between them and this silver-eyed boy can't be ignored. If anything, this silver-eyed being is much more dangerous than black-eyed children, being that he not only followed the girls home, but continued to stalk them afterward. In black-eyed children's stories, they show up, try to get inside your house or car, then seemingly disappear when you tell them no, and most people don't ever see them again. But for the girls to not only see the boy twice the first night they crossed paths with him, but several more times over the next week, that's what made me say that this could be a more dangerous entity at the beginning of the story. Now I know some of you might be thinking it was just some weird kid with novelty contacts who decided to stalk the girls, but she made a point of saying in her story that this was before that fad. Also, the boy conducted himself in a manner and displayed behaviors that coincide with black-eyed children. This includes him showing up at their house and trying to get them to invite him inside. If he was just a normal boy who followed the girls home, why would he need permission to enter the home? Why would he try so hard to get the OP to invite him in? Why not just enter the home without warning if he meant to harm them? Is he just the most polite stalker ever? In this case, this is one of the creepier stories I've come across, and I'm just glad that they were able to get him to eventually leave them alone. What do you think about this story? Have you ever heard of silver-eyed beings similar to black-eyed children? And that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed these stories. If you'd like to hear more stories like these and other types of cryptids, make sure to subscribe to the channel. If you want to send me your story, I'd love to read it. My email is wolfwhocriedcryptid@gmail.com. I will also put it in the description below. With your permission, I may want to use it in an episode. Even if you'd prefer that I didn't share your story on my channel and just want someone to listen, email me. We can privately talk about your encounter. And please remember to keep it civil in the comments section. No one deserves to be ridiculed whether they believe or not. Thank you for listening. I'll catch you at the next episode.